So I've had my eye on this Oyster Perpetual for a few years now. Take a look at this chart. These are Rolex Oyster Perpetual prices on watch charts over the last few years. You see how things kind of took a dive from early 2022, but have since kind of plateaued a little bit. So I finally pulled the trigger on this OP that I've always wanted. And since it's about the same price as my Omega Aqua Terra, I thought today we'd compare these two stellar watches to see which one makes for the perfect daily driver. Hey guys, I'm Max and this is WatchCrunch. As you know, there's lots and lots of OP models. I actually learned about this particular reference, which is from the mid-2000s, from a thread on WatchCrunch. So if you want to familiarize yourself with lots of watches without having to personally go buy them, get the app dedicated for watch nerds today. So as far as go anywhere, do anything watches are concerned, I can already hear people saying, why not the Explore? See, when I saw this particular reference of the OP, it was love at first sight. The 369 dial kind of splits the difference perfectly for me. And I've always felt like the newest OPs with the double batons were like a little lazy. Plus, I already have a sub with Mercedes hands. So to get an Explore dial with baton hands was almost like a special edition. It's more interesting to me, and not everyone else has this particular OP. Now, with a gorgeous deep blue sunburst style, it's a little dressier than an Explorer, but sportier than a regular OP. The best way for me to describe this design is that it resides somewhere between the office and like a nightclub. So I'm gonna name it the happy hour. Like you're still in your button down, but you got the sleeves rolled up with a beer in your hand. It's got that sort of relaxed, formal vibe. Being 36 millimeters, it's inconspicuous enough not to get in the way of things, and I just don't ever feel like this watch needs to be adjusted while on my wrist. It just kind of sits content, centered in place. Now, if you want to make a bigger statement, the less conservative option would be the Aqua Terra. The latest generation AT is just about perfect. Here in its 38 millimeter form, it's a perfectly versatile size that flatters lots of wrists. And if you are a big boy, there's also the 41. But compared to the Rolex, we get a lot more like shiny surfaces. There's more polish on the lugs. The hands and markers reflect the light a little bit more. You also get a sense that each element on this watch gets a bit more embellishment. For example, the dial is not content with just being a sunburst blue. There's got to be this engraved horizontal pattern that resembles the wooden deck of a yacht. The markers, they're sculpted triangles. The hands have arrow tips. The lugs, they twist into lyre lugs. And even the crown is conically shaped, tapering as it approaches the case. Now I have it here paired with the fantastic Omega blue rubber strap featuring a basket weave pattern and a sign deployant. The watch does come with a bracelet as well, but I would happily skip it because it's like a flat link style that's just not very refined. But I hear the newer bracelets for the colorful dial ATs, they're slightly improved. But compared with the Oyster Perpetual, the Aqua Terra is a sportier take on the everyday watch. If the OP is made for happy hour, then the AT is made for like Sunday brunch, maybe on the deck of your sailing yacht. When it comes to technical specs, there's not a lot of daylight between these two watches. First, both are certified for accuracy, with the Rolex being a superlative chronometer and the Omega being a master chronometer. The OP here, being like a decade and a half old of a watch, is driven by the caliber 3130, which runs at 4 Hertz, has 48 hours of power, and it's just a movement that's been evolved over the decades and well praised by watchmakers as a dream to work on. The Omega 8800 found in the Aqua Terra, though, is seen through a display caseback, and both movements are well decorated, but the Omega is the only one that we can actually see from the outside. The 8800 runs a tad slower at 3.5 Hertz, but lasts a bit longer at 55 hours. It's got this fancy coaxial escapement, which, according to watchmakers I've talked to, will perform a little more consistently as the oils run dry, as there's just less friction between the parts. But both are very strong movements without much to complain about. Now, the OP has 100 meters of water resistance, and the AT has an extra 50, both achieved through a screw-down crown, so I wouldn't worry about diving in the water with these watches. But as you can see, technically, it's pretty much a wash here. Okay, let's talk about my gripes with them, because you know I'll find some. Now, neither watch is perfect, but the list of shortcomings for the Rolex is pretty short. It's really just one thing. Being an older model, it doesn't have anti-reflective coating, so the crystal can often look a little hazy in bright light. Now, if you put this next to the Omega with the AR on both sides of the crystal, you just realize how big of a difference it could be. Sometimes it looks like the Aqua Terra has no crystal on it at all. Now, Rolex did cave recently, and they do have AR on their newer watches. The major shortcoming of the Aqua Terra, as I alluded to before, is its bracelet. It's just a bit crude. It has a lot of polish on the center. It doesn't taper much, and it doesn't drape very well on the wrist. I switched it for the rubber, and I think that's the way it's gonna stay, but it's also a 19mm lug width, so you don't have a lot of aftermarket strap options to play with. The Oyster bracelet on the Rolex though, what can I say? It's the benchmark for bracelets for a reason. It's the perfect thickness, it's got the perfect curvature to drape around the wrist, it's got the perfect taper from 20mm to 16, not too narrow, but wide enough to still be sporty. The clasp just closes very consistently with a snap. It's perfect. The other little gripe about the Aqua Terra is that the 38mm has a slightly downgraded movement compared to the 41. See, the 41 gets the 8900, which has a jump hour function, which is amazing if you travel across time zones at all. But the 8800 is just a quick set date. And you know, philosophically, I just kind of hate it when companies handicap their smaller size models. But getting back to the original question, which one of these watches do I think makes for a better daily watch, a GADA watch? I mean, the whole concept of go anywhere, do anything is a little bit silly. If you wanted that, you'd probably get a G-Shock instead. For example, you never take a Rolex on a mud run. But the essence of the question is really, which of these watches is more versatile? Neither watch fits perfectly into a box. They're not divers, chronograph, GMTs, or bona fide dress watches. They kind of can serve a lot of occasions. Now, I do think the answer here is personal. The Omega, it is a lot more fun. After wearing the Rolex for a week, putting the Aqua Terra on my wrist was a breath of fresh air. It's just so playful, it's shinier, it's more interesting to look at. It kind of just beckons you to get out there and do stuff. It's definitely the choice for someone who wants the less conservative option, the more sporty choice. But I find the OP to be a more complete watch. Paired with that Oyster bracelet, which you might get this watch just for the bracelet. You get the sense that this watch is comfortable in its own skin. It gets the fundamentals right. It doesn't need to like shout about it. It's 36 by 11.5, which is a whole mil thinner than the Aqua Terra. At no point does it feel like the watch is wearing the wearer. The Rolex, with that curvaceous Oyster case, feels like it's been just slowly evolved 1% at a time over like a century. So for me, this contest would have to go to the Oyster Perpetual. But what about you? Which one of these watches speaks to you more? I'm gonna create a poll on the WatchCrunch app where we can vote about it, so check it out there. All right, see you guys in the next one.